an improvement system approach to CI is an emerging space. So what we're seeing is the events of the DuPont production systems and the K-lean systems and so forth. I think it's still a relatively misunderstood space. For us, there are three important components in an improvement system. The one is that it needs to be maturity based. So we need to understand just where an organization is in that maturity, and moving from a stage 2 to a stage 5 is not a step change process, because it involves people and we need to get people through that movement. The second piece is around integration. So, it's all very well doing functional improvement, but functional improvement in itself doesn't give you competitive capability. So how do we integrate that functional improvement with an overall process-based improvement, and how do we link that end to end? So again, moving beyond just isolated projects of Lean and Six Sigma into a true capability building process. The third component is it's to do with sustainability, that if you are going to implement, you need to implement at three levels. So at a strategic level, we need to understand what we're trying to do. At a systems level, make sure that we have the systems in place to then support the situational tools we're applying at the shop floor.
Important to give the business scale. However, because companies have tried to codify, in a sense, too many of their best operating practices into these systems, what has happened is they've lost their agility. And what I've realized as I come to grips with Track, the new supply chain product that we're about to launch, is that an integrative improvement system is exactly that. It's integrative. In other words, if I have demand planning, supply planning, sales and operations planning, in early stages of maturity, I might be building demand forecast accuracy and demand planning. I might be building cost management capabilities and supplier rationalization in my supply system. I might only be balancing supply and demand in my sales and operations planning process. But as I get to more higher levels of maturity in my continuous improvement of performance, I have integrated process performance, integrated business planning. So therefore, why is it important? Because what DuPont have said is we could never drive this level of performance improvement over so many manufacturing sites. It's simply impossible to connect all the dots. So if I have, on the basis of maturity, all these sites progressing down the same maturity-based framework that's pulled together as an architecture of an integrative improvement system that's codified best practices, I give myself a fighting chance to drive improvement. Now, there are a couple of really good examples of companies that already do this. I mean, DuPont is driving continuous improvement across all their manufacturing sites. Procter & Gamble have been doing this for 15 years with their integrated work systems, and it has had profound impact on the business. Continuous improvement is in their DNA. They're continually looking for ways of improving the way the business operates, looking for things that aren't working, looking for changes that they can make that will improve the process, but that are sustainable improvements. In other words, I come back in 6 months' time, the metric, the way this team is operating is still the same because they haven't just resorted back because of immaturity to the old way of operating. So if I want to make end-to-end integrative change management, improvement of performance, if I don't have a systematic way of doing it and executing my end-to-end supply chain strategy, I'm probably not going to make it. Not because any of the executives are weak, because in a sense what you hear companies like DuPont and Procter & Gamble say, it's a way of harnessing IT into the end-to-end supply chain. It's a way of jumping for innovation and getting to that innovation in an operationalized way because I have a journey to get there. It's a way of teaching the business about doing supply chain and how to learn about supply chain because it's codified into the way we operate. So without an integrative, systematic way of doing this, I believe it's really not possible to execute a supply chain strategy that's end-to-end in a cost-effective and a profitable manner.
Key differentiator, in fact, is this question about integration and how widely and broadly they they define the initiative. So it excludes nothing, completely integrated. And the biggest fallacy then is that people try these unintegrated approaches, and especially from a functional perspective, we find many organizations that try within themselves, within a function, to select and find the best point solution for their initiative. So it could be training, it could be a maintenance system, it could be a safety approach, etc. So they buy, and from different vendors, by the way, they buy these different things, these different approaches, and they believe their job then is to integrate. In our experience, that integration process is the most difficult. So you end up with all sorts of different languages, different focus, different sort of technical language, different areas of focus and emphasis. You now have competing resource requirements. So you want Joe Bloggs off the production line to be in that session and in this session and so forth. Because they're owned and run functionally, there's no unifying process either for implementation. So apart from these initiatives not talking to each other from a technical point of view or in an intellectual way, dovetailing, they run as separate projects too, which makes it even worse. So a great deal of difficulty around that. The best at implementing and sustaining CI know that the integration piece is the most important. It's also the most difficult. So, and I've heard clients say this to me, that it is better to have a 60 or 70% solution in terms of any one aspect, okay, in an integrated way, than it is to have the best solution in each area of functional expertise and then try and integrate them. And let me give you an example. If you think about a sports team, just imagine getting a sports team made up of individuals who are the best in the world, anywhere in the world, getting them together on the sports field, doesn't matter what game it is, and 1 minute before the start whistle blows, they run onto the field. All they know is the position they're playing. They don't know anybody else. They have no game plan. They don't know how to interact. They don't know the behaviors and characteristics and strong points of their now teammates, and they're expected to win a game. Now, let me tell you, that's exactly how many businesses run. It's absolute disaster. Why would we run a business like that? It is far better. If you ask me where I'd put my money, and we've got 2 sports teams, I would put my money on a sports team that is maybe 70% of the individual talent of these all-stars, all right? But they've trained and worked together for months and years. They've honed their game plan. They know each other's idiosyncrasies, strengths and weaknesses, all right? And they've got their secret plays that they can call at a moment's notice, and they can adapt and change and morph. Okay? They will win every time. That's about integrated systems, and the power of integration just cannot be underestimated. And that's where Track really comes into its strength and its fore. Completely integrated, top to bottom, east to west, north to south, with all aspects of what we need in a CI journey.
In Asia, the organizations are really very top-down, very hierarchical driven, and it's going to take some time for them to really understand the full power of empowerment, specifically around the decision-making that could happen and should happen at the lower levels. And I think the fear that a lot of the managers have to really underpin that process with real actions is driving methodology rather than integrated change. And that also has the effect that many of the implementations that we see that are not sustainable are actually driven off the technique implementation basis rather than an integrated methodology which really changes the way that people make decisions in organizations, the way that people act in the organizations, and the way that the culture changes in the organization.
I think we have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves whether when we implemented IT, did we really take a balanced approach to practices and operations excellence as well as automating the processes? So the answer to the question is really, of course IT is important. I can't manage 50 financial systems across the business in an efficient way. So I integrate those core processes that are core to the business and the way it operates, like HR, like finance, like materials management. But I think the reality is a lot of systems and businesses have hard-coded best practices into their IT system. And in fact, we saw with Nokia, in a sense, who saw the economy changing, very hard-coded practices into their big ERP installation, and as a result, it was very hard for them to be nimble and agile to change to meet that demand. So I think the answer is IT is an essential element of automating processes, core processes in the business. Make it easier to do finance, to manage people, to manage materials. But then don't forget that in the process, demand may change, so we must not try and hard code the entire end-to-end business in an IT system, because when things change, it's much too difficult then to go and adapt the system. And that's why we see these organizations with thousands of people in IT literally continually fixing and unraveling systems and driving master data management, because in a sense, IT is driving the business rather than the end-to-end business processes driving IT. And that's a very fundamental change. I'm in fact even seeing CIOs in companies being changed out because they were largely chief technology officers rather than chief information officers. And folks who are closer to the end-to-end processes in the business take on these roles. So very fundamental change in IT from the point of view of these big end-to-end integrated systems. The other point is that in operating an end-to-end supply chain, information is a very critical enabler. If I can't see demand and translate it across the end-to-end supply chain as it's happening, in other words, if I see it 5 weeks later, there's a good chance that I'm responding in the wrong way. So information spread across events, visible across the end-to-end supply chain, is a very important component of the capability to operate as an end-to-end operation strategy.